And so I went and spoke to the office manager and said, hey, like, I don't know what's going on. I've put this order in several times. I still don't have my business cards. And he said to me, administrative assistants don't get business cards. and so that experience was a turning point for me. So much so that, I found my voice. So even though I was a shy only child, I had to express to him, look, I'm not an administrative assistant. I'm at the same level as this person who has business cards. And I have a master's degree. I had to go there, with this individual.
Let him know.
Right. I had to read, and then, what happened though in all of that, I eventually got my cards, but then I was talking about another opportunity at the organization, and I ended up moving into that opportunity. And in that, speaking to another staff member outside of my department said, well, we heard that you're kind of, you might cause trouble. And I was like, trouble? And so at that point, I was like, oh, I see how this is going to go in America. You know what I mean? That was for me, the turning point in understanding just all of you have to work twice as hard. That was for me the real pivotal moment in that I am going to have to always speak up. I am going to always have to advocate for myself. I don't have the option of sitting back if I want to be successful. So for me, that has driven me, that experience, not only for myself and advocating for myself, but really for those around me and my passion for advocating for children and families.
Welcome back to another episode here on the Hart and Hustle podcast. Listen, this next guest, she oversees 27 life-changing programs impacting thousands of families. But that journey, it wasn't smooth. Shauna, welcome to the Hart and Hustle podcast. I told you I was gonna get you right in deep. Let's rewind. When did you first realize this work supporting families and kids wasn't just a job, but truly just a mission, your mission?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me, Frank. It's an honor to be here. I, love to share sort of about how I fell into nonprofit work. I was a college student, had an opportunity to get an internship. My degrees are in public communications, and there was a shelter for battered women in Washington, D.C. that was looking for someone to do press releases and work with them on developing a teen dating violence program. And so I thought, well, this is really all I have available. This seems pretty cool. And I'm interested. I've always had an interest in women's studies and thought, let me learn more about it. And in that process, they train you to do the work of the hotline. So you learn a lot about domestic violence. You learn a lot about that network. You learn how it crosses over socioeconomic lines, how it is really, the violence against women in our society is an issue, a big issue. And so I had the opportunity to do press releases, and then they just sent me out on my own to talk to high school kids about teen dating violence, et cetera, and get to know them and share resources with them. And so it was such a wonderful opportunity and so freeing. And then just learning about how instrumental you can be, how impactful you can be by just sharing information and giving resources. Didn't seem like a big deal, but it's something that folks didn't know about. It's something that kids had never heard about. And so really felt like I was making an impact in just 3 months' time of that internship. And then I moved on to get a graduate degree and had an opportunity to work for the American Society of Association Executives. And I worked on their 4-Color magazine because, again, I was in communications and learned all about editing and all of that good stuff in communication. And it was wonderful, but it opened me up to this world of organizations that, some of them do have money, but they're really mission driven. And so I learned from there, wow, this association thing is really interesting. You can work for a specific organization, and if you're passionate about it, you can really make an impact. And so my first real job was with a 4-Color magazine, and I did that and did some editing. and then moved into their international department where I was able to plan meetings and edit newsletters and work and look for people or work with people that really were passionate about supporting two-year colleges and education globally. And we know that for women, the more education women have, the likelier they are to have less children, to make sure their children are educated, and to be able to be lifted out of poverty. And so I was learning all of this sort of anecdotal information that began to really feed my passion around children and families. So it was really an exciting time. Had no idea what I was sort of falling into. And then my next job was really with the National Family Planning and Reproductive Health Association, where I learned really the importance of women having access to quality reproductive health care in order to make choices that impact their lives. And so it was really, I spent 10 years there. I was very passionate about that work, and realized that this was going to be a lifelong thing for me.
You just love people.
I do.
That's it.
I do.
You just
It's
love
true.
people.
I do.
I love it so much. And I'm sitting here and I smile because you just literally bring light to a room. You can just tell. And that's why I say you love people. Because the first time I met you, I got that. You seem like just that cool person, that cool auntie, that cool mom. Like that's what I get from across the screen. So I can imagine who you are as a leader. And I kind of want to talk about this leadership journey you started really early on, because I was just mentioning to another leader that we don't have enough young people in the nonprofit space, and her question is like, yeah, why is that? And I felt it's because we don't talk about it enough, right? That's why these conversations are happening. We're very like-minded people. We're kind of in that youth space, right? We still look good, what I'm saying? People can probably relate to us a little bit. But I think it is because the conversation's not happening enough. So it's actually very interesting that you said you picked this up very early. So nonprofit, is it because you were just this very curious individual and felt it was very different than the norm? Because we're told, doctor, go be a teacher. That's just the norm. But you completely went off something that no one was thinking. How do you get into this space? What made you think I want to be a nonprofit?
Wow, yeah, I definitely went off the grid. I think it was really seeing the needs, right? When I look around and realized how privileged I have been, and I've been able to access education through athletic ability. I've been able to. I'm originally from Canada. I came here as a college student, and when I saw that like everyone around me didn't necessarily have those same privileges, it made me wonder. It made me curious, And so then the work that I did at the Shelter for Battered Women and Their Children made me learn how do folks get into these situations, like what's going on in terms of the life choices that they're making or not making that might put them in a situation that's at risk. And so I think that curiosity is what really drove me to learn more. And I think the more that I learned and realized that you can make a career, even though it's quote unquote nonprofit, but you can make a career and still make decent money, but also really truly leave a legacy and a lifelong impact depending on what you choose. That's really what turned me. That and my passion for fairness and equity.
And you mentioned, right, what's the outtake or what's the return of investment when you give your time to a nonprofit? It truly is happiness. I promise you not that any leader that I speak to, and I spoke to two that was very surprising. Last week, I think I spoke to a judge that was realizing that he was sending some of these young kids to jail. He's like, how do I help them? Before they get here, how do I go help them? He left being a judge and went to go work in the nonprofit space. And when you see the guy, you could tell, awesome. You could just see peace all over him, right? And he's happy. Right before this call, I was speaking to an attorney that was she loved it, and she also realized, like, I think what it was for her, she went through maybe cancer or something like that. So it sparked, the mindset a little bit. And she felt it wasn't just about her and what she was doing at that level. I needed to make bigger impacts. An attorney leaving, these are high paying jobs when you think about it.
Yeah.
But when I speak to her, she says, but I'm happy. You don't get that in the corporate world all the time when people is like, but I'm happy, smile on my face because I know that I made a difference today.
Right.
So yeah, you've been happy ever, you made a good decision. Just let's start there. But
I think so.
You've also really you put on a lot of hats You talk about communications, you talk about management, you talk about leadership. What's that one role that shaped really where your grit comes from?
Ooh, that's a really great question. I will say, so I was a college athlete. So I share that because I didn't even realize my privilege in that. I was a beneficiary of Title IX. Me and my roommate were the first two recipients of full rides at the
Wow.
American University to play basketball. I'm coming from Canada, don't know the system, don't really understand any of that.
Right.
But that experience of leaving home, I think, and coming here in a new environment and really, Americans are serious about their sports,
Yeah.
and if anything, anything the coach would yell, my coach would be like, you need to be more aggressive. You need to, and I'd be like, well, I don't want to hurt them, that kind of thing. So definitely the college athletic experience really made me more aggressive per se, at least on the court. And I think it also relieved stress. Like I think the idea of that level of physical activity was really good for me personally. And so that made a difference. But I think from a work perspective, my first job, I seldom share this story, but my first job, I was hired to be an assistant editor for Four Color magazine. And I had a colleague that I shared an office with. We both had desks. And she was hired a couple months before I was hired. And she was not a person of color. And as we worked together, and I worked on the Four Color and then did some things for her boss as well, who was doing the newsletter, I came to find out that she made $1,000 more than I did. She was offered $1,000 more. Then in addition to that, I had to wait months and months and months to get my business cards. And so I went and spoke to the office manager and said, hey, I don't know what's going on. I've put this order in several times. I still don't have my business cards. And he said to me, administrative assistants don't get business cards. and so that experience was a turning point for me. So much so that, I found my voice. So even though I was a shy only child, I had to express to him, look, I'm not an administrative assistant. I'm at the same level as this person who has business cards. And I have a master's degree. I had to go there, with this individual.
Let him know.
Right. I had to read, and then, what happened though in all of that, I eventually got my cards, but then I was talking about another opportunity at the organization and I ended up moving into that opportunity. And in that, speaking to another staff member outside of my department said, well, we heard that you're kind of, you might cause trouble. And I was like, trouble? And so at that point, I was like, oh, I see how this is going to go in America. You know what I mean? That was for me, the turning point in understanding just all of you have to work twice as hard. That was for me the real pivotal moment in that I am going to have to always speak up. I am going to always have to advocate for myself. I don't have the option of sitting back if I want to be successful. So for me, that has driven me, that experience, not only for myself and advocating for myself, but really for those around me and my passion for advocating for children and families.
That's where that grit came from, because people were already trying to count you out from a long time ago.
Right.
You gotta let them know. You gotta let them know. You mentioned, you didn't so much mention it, but representation clearly is a big deal, right? Which is why I love having some of these conversations. We have some people from all walks of life, right? And just showing love to everyone. But you being a woman, right? There's already a barrier there. But then now you're a woman of color. You talked about some of the issues. How important is it for you to be, a leader and represent what it actually looks like to be in this role? I can only imagine that there has to be some weight on your shoulders doing the things that you're doing, being in the rooms that you've done, being the first of many in certain situations. But how important is this to you to kind of showcase representation in this space?
So it's vitally important. I think, for me, I work with, we're such a large organization. I work for a varied and diverse group of folks. It's really quite wonderful. We are under African American leadership at Illinois Action for Children,
Love it.
which is awesome. But I think my commitment has been to raise all boats, right? To bring as many as possible. And so I've had the opportunity to mentor teen girls, young girls. I've had the opportunity to lead youth through children's ministry. And I think it is really important, even though I'm not a teacher, to make sure that when I can, that I'm giving in a way that I can give to support them on their journey, even if it's for a short period of time, right? To be able to have that impact so they know, oh, maybe I could do this one day too, or maybe
Yeah.
I could, or they ask me questions about how did you become a leader, or how did you do this, that, or the other. And I think it's important to really make sure that you're making yourself available for folks, because there isn't enough representation, to be quite frank.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the podcast, we first want to say thank you. And we also just want to give you a little insight of what we're up to at FRANSiS. Some don't even realize that we're working with organizations to help them use AI to create that real human communication experiences, whether that's actually supporting your families, those patients, or the entire community. We're actually creating tech that connects. Check it out, francis.ai. You know, it's funny that you just said, I'm not a teacher, but, right? And I think that I was just having this thought to myself this morning, is that it don't matter if it was a teacher or not. We can remember people in our lives, whether it was a mom's ex-boyfriend or old best friend, that still showed you something, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing about people, right? About lessons that we learn. So you being that small part of somebody's life could be what changes them for the lifetime, because they seen a woman of color in leadership. She's so kind, she's so sweet, she's happy. How the hell do I get there? Right? So I praise all teachers, but I always say, as a leader, we have to just show up. We want people to do better, and we have to show them better. What does that look like? So you're right, is making sure that while I'm with them, I'm making the biggest impacts.
Yeah.
That I'm leading, right? That I'm showing them what a leader actually looks like. So I love it. And you've been doing the work for 20 plus years. What's one thing now that you actually wish you knew then? Anything coming to mind?
Ooh, yeah, that's a great question. I think, I just entered this sphere of early childhood about 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've worked for other nonprofits doing different things. And I think if I'd known the impact you can have not only on a newborn young child and their family, I would have done it sooner. I think that's the only sort of significant difference. You have the opportunity to impact two generations forever and change the trajectory of their lives when you work in early childhood. It is monumentous what you can accomplish. And so I think that would be the only thing I would do differently.
I love that. I love that because you are 100% right. And actually, I used to have I still do, a mentor that she ran a daycare. It was like a karate and boxing. And now those same kids that she used to have are now bringing her kids because they know she's a trusted resource, right?
Nice.
Like that's what you're talking about, is people understanding this is a trusted resource. Like,
Yeah.
look what she did for me when I was a young kid. I remember these things. Of course, I know my child is in good hands, and that's what we need right now. Community more than ever. So I love that you kind of talk on that. But I ask you, because you talk about these programs and everything that you're really doing. You're running over 24 programs and probably more. How do you stay human in the middle of all that structure? Like, are you even real? Are you AI?
I think I'd have more than five fingers, right? If that were the case. So I will tell you this. There are years where my husband jokes that I am an executive without a portfolio. He's in corporate, he's a chemist. And so, some of the things that I've done, I know I wouldn't necessarily be able to do without a supportive partner, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, and these right now are incredibly stressful times. I joke at work that I'm actually sour Shauna. We joke all the time because I feel like I'm always bringing bad news about what could potentially be happening funding wise for us. But I will say this, that, and I'm a woman of faith, but I think even for folks that aren't, if you are passionate about something, I think that's the key to getting out of bed every day. I think that even in dark times, if you have a passion or you have faith in what it is that you're doing, if you know that deep down you're making an impact, that's something to get up for. That's something to smile about, even in dark times. And I think for me, that is what keeps me going. That is what drives me.
Mhm. Having faith in humanity, having faith
Yes.
that you are a part of the difference. 100%. I do love you on a roll right now. This is just too good, Charlie. You is on the
You're so
roll.
kind.
You were talking about preparing all. Listen, there's no need. We're having a good time. But I do want to talk about that you mentioned is sour Shauna, and that comes from because right now we're in a space where the government is changing a lot of things, right? And I can imagine, I think you mentioned last night we talked, there was some challenging times, and I think there may have been some layoffs. How do you process it as a leader? Like behind closed doors, what was going through your head, understanding that it wasn't a choice that you wanted to make. It was you were forced to make it because of funding issues that our government has kind of put upon us.
It's hard. It is really hard. I think, again, as a woman of faith, I know that I am not in control, so like there's a grander picture than what
Mhm.
I'm in and what I'm seeing. But I think it's hard when I look at um, how much good we've been able to do and how much progress we've been able to make and how many families we've been able to support. And then to lose a portion of funding that we know is not only impacting families potentially, but just our workforce, right? Like
Mhm.
having those really hard conversations about we don't know if we're going to be able to continue to fund this program. And now they're looking at potentially losing their livelihoods. And so it is heart wrenching. It is very, very difficult to one, deliver that kind of news and to share that. And right now, it's only potential. Head Start and early Head Start are still in the budget, but we know now Medicaid is getting ready to get cut. And so many of the families we serve, even though we're not responsible for that program, they're going to be impacted negatively by that. And so it is really, really heavy stuff. And so it is important that we think about wellness and we think about self-care. And so even organizationally, we know after COVID, post-COVID, we've had a lot of stress. We see a lot of stress in our workforce, a lot of
Mhm.
burnout. And so in our early learning programs, we've developed a staff wellness plan, and we built these, well, not built, but we set up these little wellness areas so teachers can step out of the classroom
Mhm.
and really decompress, because we recognize the level of stress that they're under, and they're now really taking care of kids that were born during COVID, right? And these kids, a lot of them didn't have regular socialization until
Mhm.
now. And we're seeing a lot of developmental and behavioral challenges, which is really demanding on a teacher. And so just making sure that we're reminding people about self-care opportunities, making them available. I'm leading an effort around trauma-informed practice at our organization to make sure that we understand that some of the behaviors we see that are negative, even in parents, right, might be coming from a place of trauma, might be coming from a place of
Mhm.
challenge, so that we can better serve, so that we can be mindful of that. But most importantly, it's about each one of us as individuals taking care of ourselves and doing what we need to do to make sure that we are getting the supports that we need for our mental and emotional health during these really, really tough times.
I love that mental health and emotional health is such a okay thing to talk about, right? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter who you talk to, mental health comes becomes a part of the conversation for all of us. Like mental health is something that everyone deals with, right? No matter what age, no matter what color, like we all deal with this. So I love that we have these conversations more and more, and we're being so open about it, and we don't mind having these conversations because it is true. You talk about, I really kind of go back because I started laughing. I also have a COVID baby. That's what we call them, right?
Oh,
COVID
yeah.
babies.
Yeah. Wow.
And my wife was a stay-at-home mom. So you talk about just my child not seeing and knowing anything, right, for the first couple of years. Especially my wife being a first time mom, there's already like, I don't want no one to touch my baby. But now there's COVID out there too. Oh, I really don't want no one to touch my baby. And we're starting to see that now. You know, we have a son now and we see the difference, right? And then someone had to remind us, well, you guys had this child during COVID when you guys are all she knew. You know, we're like, yeah, you're right. So now we got to try to get her in activities and making sure that she still has that interaction with other little humans
Yeah,
as
very
well.
important.
So yeah, very important what you were saying. So I just kind of want to touch on that because we're experiencing it. You know, I do know
Yeah.
what that looks like.
Yeah.
So
And your baby internalized all the stress that you were feeling during that time. You know, they're
yeah,
like sponges. And so,
yeah.
you know, there probably is some apprehension, you know, and so just knowing that that impacts your child as well, so that you're just building in resources to help them to
100%.
be successful, right? And to build that strong foundation for kindergarten. So it's great that you're reaching out and trying to figure out how to get your child more involved in activities.
Oh, got to. I mean, she is a handful. Okay, now she's gonna be jumping off my walls, jumping off couches.
That's awesome. A little gymnast in the making.
You know what's funny is I always ask her, I was like, so what do you want to do? We're trying to get that extracurricular activity. And we had a place like, I'm not sure that there's a location where you're at, but it's called My Gym.
Yeah.
And okay, so you're familiar with it. She loved it. And we were going to take her back. And she's like, no, I want to be a ballerina because that's what girls do and boys can't. I'm like, well, so I had to let her know. I said, actually, nowadays, first of all, girls could do anything. If you want to be a basketball player, football player, you go do whatever the hell it is you want to do.
Yep.
But even boys, you know, like, you know, the same thing. So I had to let her know, like, you think it's just a girl thing, but don't be surprised when you see a boy in a tutu, you know,
Right.
that's just the world we live in. And it's okay. You can't judge that person off of it. But, you know, with these little kids, you got to be very mindful, man. We just passed the house the other
Yeah.
day and, you know, maybe it was a hoarder situation. And she's like, mind you, they're outside. Wow, our house is so dirty. They need to clean that up. And I'm like, please, let's keep it moving.
You're like,
Please. I
priceless
love
out of the
kids,
mouths
man.
of babes.
I love them though, man. Kids will say anything and everything,
They
but they're
will.
truly are a blessing. Um, you try to modernize from inside automated payments, paperless systems. What pushback did you get when you're trying to really innovate and people
That's
don't see past today?
that's a great question. So certainly at the organization I had the opportunity to run in Central Illinois, we worked to change our payroll. We ended up outsourcing it, and that took about a year. To really get that through. And I was the executive director at the time, to give you an idea. I even had authority and it still took a year, you know. But I know that particularly in the nonprofit space, the difference, one of the major differences with corporate is that you do wear many hats. You do many things. I make my own copies. I don't have an assistant, you know, and all of that. But that also means that so does every other role, right? There's not just one comptroller. That comptroller is taking care of everything financial, you know, maybe submitting grants, doing all kinds of things. And so as a result of that, folks can gatekeep a little bit. And I think what I am noticing, particularly now at a larger organization, is that we are seeing a massive generational shift. I think all of the workforce is. And it's taking a minute for, dare I say, baby boomers and even some of us generation, you know, Xers to really get on board with those shifts and those changes. And so, you know, in my role, I've been really blessed to be able to be a leader, is to start talking about it and to start thinking about how can we begin to implement things that will bring us into the future, that will make us more efficient and more effective, so that we can focus on serving the children and families we want to serve, right? And not have to focus on like trying to compile surveys from, you know, 500 different sheets of paper. So we, in one of our programs in early learning, we are really moving to go paperless. And so that we're in the midst of that change management right now and getting, excuse me, folks trained on how to use our database. It was really only a couple of individuals' responsibility to put data in the database, and we did everything on paper. And you know, but it allowed us to see how ineffective we were being and how much time administration was taking. And so the staff now has embraced it, realizing, oh, this is much more efficient. I can now look up and see, what kids are in XY classroom without having to call and wait for someone to go count children in a classroom. So we are seeing small gains and wins as we do this implementation. I think as a whole, though, we still have a long way to go. I think if we can get this team up to speed over the next year, which is our goal, it will really set the pace for some of our other parts of the organization. On the state level, we process the Child Care Assistance Program on behalf of the Illinois Department of Human Services. And as a result of that, it's nothing but paper. But the state is moving to figure out a mobile app for families so that they may be able to apply for this funding if they're eligible. They can see all of that and find a provider and do all of that without doing this 17-page laborious, application. And so we know that that's coming. We're actually piloting that now at the state. And so that means it'll change our work as well. It'll streamline things for us as well. So we know over the next 3 years, we're going to face these changes anyway. Right now, my goal is to get us a little ahead of the curve. So we aren't feeling like we're trying to catch up, but it's just interesting because, we have folks saying, well, what we're doing now isn't broken. Like, why do we need to fix it? And then you'll have others saying, well, why is it that we can't, submit our expense reports electronically? So, and those folks tend to be millennials. You know what I mean? Like, it's just interesting to see the varied groups around the table. But what's nice is we do have diversity around the table, which is allowing us to really think through innovation at our organization.
And what's happening right now, I feel like nonprofits are acting allergic to tech in 2025. I'll tell you what I walked into. One moment. So you talk about taking over an organization. When I walked into an organization, we talk about data. They gave me this. They said, "This is it. This is what you got right here." So I'm looking through it. I'm like, oh, so we handwritten phone numbers in here. Oh, addresses too? Like, I'm sitting here like, you got to be kidding me. Don't get me wrong. I looked through and there's some good things. You can see that they were very organized, but you couldn't pass that on to me digitally, and then I got to go back and then I got to, create the CRM, because data is everything nowadays, right? But it's crazy how this is a 30-year-old organization, and this is what was given to me was like 2-3 binders. I went to the school and I looked through all these boxes, and I was very surprised on how everything was just handwritten. And even when I went to an event, maybe a year or 2 years ago, when they were trying to collect emails, they were letting people just write it down. I'm like, they could just scan it and do it on their phones because everyone has access to their phones, right? Why do you think that we're in a space where nonprofits feel allergic or acting allergic to tech in 2025?
I honestly believe it's generational. I believe, the baby boomers, even in corporate, are still running the show for the most part. And I think that's a large part of it. I think there is a real fear about their ability to control data. If they, I don't know, I don't want to say move from paper, but there's just a lack of understanding about how valuable it is to use all of these modern systems to help you better operate, right? We know that if we're able to get pertinent information in data systems, we can actually run reports that show us how we're doing in everything from family engagement, customer service, financially, it's every piece, marketing, how many people are going to our website, how many people are looking at our social media. And I will give a shout out to our marketing team. They do know that they're probably the ones leading the charge in that regard, and in terms of trying to get us even attuned to social media. But I think that there's a real lack of understanding of the value of the data and how you can look at trends to better drive your business, even as a nonprofit. Often we work to please our funders, even though we're working to create impact. And there is not an understanding that there's an opportunity to streamline and even have greater impact if we learn and understand how to read data, what data should we be collecting, and how do we analyze and look at trends. And I think that's a skill that really needs to be honed in the nonprofit sector.
Okay. Okay. Let's. I got another question for you. How about this? I don't know if you ever experienced this in your life, but there's the idea of wait your turn when it comes to leadership, right?
Yeah.
I've heard that, and I don't know if you've heard it. Have you ever had to politely but firmly say, no, 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 my time, my turn, my time is now?
That is a great question. So I think I think for me, not so much. Well, that's a lie. I was just thinking about that. There was one organization where I came in as I think I came in as a manager, and I really should have been. No, I came in as a director. And they had no VP of meetings and expositions. And I really should have been in that role. But I applied for the director, I got hired for the director, and that other position was vacant. And so I ended up doing all the work pretty much. And then they hired someone who was quite frankly less competent, also not a person of color. And then I had to create a lot of workarounds to work with this person. I did my best, but it turns out that there was some intimidation factors, related to us. I had to say, look, I don't want your job. Like, it's okay. Like they were just all like, she wouldn't give me information that I needed to do my role. It was ugly. And she ended up getting let go, and they were like, what are we going to do? And then I was like, well, and at this point I was having a baby. So I said, you know what? I said, I think I should have this role, and I'll do this until my family relocates. And so I was given the role, and I did a great job of preparing them for the next meeting until they could transition, to have someone else come on board and I could move out. And normally I would not have done that. But after experiencing this individual and realizing, wait a minute, I absolutely should have had this role. I have better leadership skills. Sometimes it takes that negative experience to realize all that you bring to the table.
100%.
And yeah. And so that's what
I do agree.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to someone, say a 30-year-old version of yourself? Well, let's just say a 30-year-old in general, right? Walks into a boardroom where no one looks like them. What advice do you provide?
I say, make sure you go and find out everyone who is in that room. Shake hands, make eye contact, say who you are. Fake it till you make it if you're nervous, right? Talk about who you are and why you're there, to let them know that you're confident in why you're in that room and that you are bringing something to the table. I think that is so very important, that people know from the outset that you have the confidence to do the work and you expect that your voice will be heard.
Love it. That is true, though. Confidence, and that's where people lack, right? And that's why people kind of stay in the same roles at times, because it's not that they're not fit for that role, because they are. We kind of talked about where sometimes we're overlooked. I'll tell you what, I commend anyone that went and got an education and got a piece of paper, but you cannot tell me that piece of paper outworks experience, right? Yeah. So I was a 19-year-old young man that had so much drive, and I spent 8 years with a company, and then someone that just came out with a 4-year bachelor's degree in business management gets the position over me, right? Like I circles around this person, but that's just kind of where space that we're in at times, right? Depending who's the leader, because I could imagine that there was a different leader, they would see it completely different, right? Like look at the 8 years of experience versus someone that just came in and we're just giving them the supervisor position, but this person managed $1 million locations and did X, Y, Z. So I hear you on that confidence. I'll tell you another one that I walked into. I will never forget this lady, man. She was so rude, but she walked in. Okay, she was not a woman of color. She walked in with her binder, and every Tuesday we had a meeting. And I worked for a restaurant, but our location was a little unique because we were the food court. So I happened to still having to show up to this meeting, even though I didn't work for them. Whatever, I showed up, and I showed up on time. This lady was late. Okay, so I sat in the seat that was empty. It happened to be at the head of the table, right? I wasn't wanting to sit at the head of the table. It was just empty.
It was
so
empty,
I sat there.
Right?
She she's walking up, and everybody kind of like look at her and look at me, and they must know something was going to go on. And I'm sitting here like, she says, and that's like, oh, that's her seat. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe I was a little asshole, but I'm so sorry. I didn't know we had assigned seats. Her response was, oh, don't worry. He's just young and immature. I said, Well, at least I showed up to the meeting on time. Like, like sometimes you have to have these conversations,
Right.
because you know what? People will talk to you any kind of way,
Very true.
because you're young, because you have color,
Yeah.
because you act different,
Yeah.
because you look different, because you talk different.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that happen. I
Yes.
was in Jamaica. I'll tell you another story where you have to have confidence in who you are, and just do not allow people to get to you. I was in Jamaica, and this woman was helping me and the family, really nice lady, and the husband was so upset at his kids. Nothing that she did, but more of his kids were just kind of all over the place. So he was a little upset. So he asked her a question, and she obviously didn't get the answer. He didn't get the answer she wanted. He says, "That's why this country is poor, and you guys were like." And I'm saying, like, where did that come from?
Wow.
So I had to look at her and say, "Listen, as an American, that's not how we talk. But people will look at you and talk down to you. But you got to have confidence and know, listen, I don't care what someone got to say. You know, I know who I am, and believe in yourself. Have faith in who you are."
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it does take time to take those moments that where someone,
Yeah.
got to kind of try it for you, the confidence to show up. But I would say anyone that is listening as a leader, yeah, just show up always authentically you.
Very important.
And know that, listen, when people don't want you in the room, that's okay. There's other rooms, there's other tables that you can go sit at that will,
Right.
more, especially the nonprofit space, that will embrace good leadership.
Can I just say one thing related to
100%.
that? Sometimes people may not want you in the room, but maybe they're the ones in the wrong room.
Come on now, Shauna.
Especially as
Hey,
time.
ain't no fight. We're going to drop it, bro. Come on. I love it. That is so good. All right. So let's talk biopic leadership.
Okay.
What are we losing every time an emerging leader walks away from this work?
Wow. Brilliance, innovation, the next big idea or the next big problem being solved. Potentially, we might be losing out on someone who has an idea to solve world hunger, to solve poverty. There's just, we live in a society where we waste so much. And I don't think we understand what we're losing when we let young people walk out the door. And I think even when you shared your example of how they hired someone with a degree rather than promote you in your role, like what a missed opportunity, right? You were already committed to the organization. Who knows how long that outsider would have lasted? But the idea that they didn't take the time to invest in you based on what you'd already committed and done is, that's a loss for them. That's a huge loss for them. And so I just think as leaders, it's really important to look at who's around us and really be intuitive as to who's really giving and committed and passionate. And then it's our role as leaders to figure out how to bring them to where they want to go. And I think it is our job to constantly be replacing ourselves. I think one of our teammates said the other day, that is our role as leaders, to figure out how do we raise up as many as possible, because it takes a village, right? It takes a community to meet the needs.
I was going to add to what you said. That just stems though from a good leader. A good leader has to see that, right? And a lot of times you'll see that in a good leader that would hate to hire from the outside when we can hire from the inside and have so much talent, especially when the organization is so big. It always bothered me, man, when I was able to see that. And it's usually what happens, right, is that someone comes over and it's like, I'm bringing my whole posse with me, and that's how people kind of get into those spaces. And that's like, now you have all good talent just leave other places where you had a team in front of you and you didn't even see it. Right? You didn't even take the time to figure it out. So I love that you actually added that in there. I can't even believe how long we've been talking, 40 minutes. And I'm saying, like, wait a minute, we got to start wrapping this up. Okay, we got things to do. Well, I don't. Maybe you got some things to do. But I do truly appreciate what you've done, and thus far, you still got so much work. I can only tell. You look like you got another 20, 30 years. Your energy level is
I don't
up
know
here,
about
okay?
that.
What's one message you give to someone who's tired of fighting the system but still believes in the work?
There are many ways that we can give back. I think there are times that we can feel burnout, particularly in the nonprofit sector. And we can sort of feel like were washed and washed up and dried out. I think it's important to be able to step back and get refreshed and renew your passion. But there are always other ways you can give. And so I think I appreciate what you shared about the judge who was like, you know what, I need to go help over here because I realize I can make a difference. I think sometimes we can be really closed-minded and think this is all we can do, or I've spent my whole life doing only this, and therefore I don't have transferable skills. And the one thing I will say about working in nonprofits is your skills are often way more abundant than those in corporate because you had to wear so many hats. And so never sell yourself short, and recognize that it's okay to step back, but try to do self-care now so you never get to that point. Like, know yourself and when you are burning out. So you step back before you get to that point, right? And do what you need to do to renew and refresh. And I think that's a newer lesson that we're learning outside of COVID, to really take care of ourselves, because it's important. We want to be here a long time and we want to be giving back a long time.
100%. And for those of us who want to support or even work with organizations like Illinois Action for Children, where should we start? Social media, give your Instagram, websites, talk about it.
So absolutely. I think, we started as an advocacy organization. And so we are always doing work on behalf of children and families in the state of Illinois. We're working with legislators. We actually just came from a press conference. The city of Chicago is investing $7 million towards compensation for childcare workers throughout the city.
Okay.
They anticipate supporting about 3,000 workers. And, I had the opportunity to testify before City Council last fall. This has been a hard-earned fight to really elevate the need for childcare workers to at least get a living wage. And so there's a lot of good work that's happening, but it takes all voices to come together to understand what the needs are and to really advocate for those needs. And folks can do everything from looking up our organization on social media, and obviously giving. We always take dollars. The work is always there. We always need more support for sure, but there are other ways to give. We have an e-advocate newsletter that folks can keep abreast of kind of what's happening, what's impacting childcare here in the state of Illinois. We also have, we operate the We the Village Coalition, which is a coalition of parents and childcare providers and advocates really working together to talk about the importance of supporting the workforce that's behind the workforce and providing children with or families with affordable, accessible childcare where they live. And so there are many ways that folks can learn more about us. But I think with nonprofits, we look for volunteers occasionally. I think most nonprofits do. They're in the work of using people however they come to us to make the most of it. And so if you just want to get your feet wet, you can serve on a board. If you'd like to do that, you can figure out volunteer opportunities, and of course you can always give money.
Love it. Time for that blind question. You ready?
I am ready.
If I give you 30 days off, fully paid, no laptop, no work talk, where would you go? Who would you take? And what would you do that no one expects from you?
Wow, that's a fabulous question. So recently Tahiti came to mind. You know how you joke about, I want to go to Tahiti? I was like, where did that dream ever go? So I would love to do that. I've never been East, so I would love to be able to do that, maybe explore some of Asia. I think in terms of something that would surprise folks, I think I would also take some time and maybe build something. I joke that if I wasn't doing this, I'd be a carpenter. And so just learning how to use different saws is something I have been angling to do and figuring out when will I do this? And so I'd probably take a week and maybe do, like a little Home Depot class or like a little carpentry class to learn how to do that as well. But I would definitely be in on the rest and relaxation and exploring a new, beautiful scene. That would be wonderful.
And who are you taking? Who's the lucky person?
I guess I'd take my husband. I'd let him come along for that, I guess. He would be bitter if I took one of the children. So I would absolutely bring my husband along as well.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned doing something different, right? My best friend, she was in the dental world for so many years and just kind of got
Mm,
drained, right? Like being overlooked, as we mentioned, you know, opening up these
wow.
new offices, and whenever they didn't need her, they would just get rid of her. That's just kind of what it looked like, right?
Yeah.
So she then moved to Arizona, from Boston to Arizona, knew nothing in Arizona, tried to get a job at a hospital, and same thing happened. Before 90 days, she done painted his office, organized his office, like the office making money. Before 90 days, they let her go, and
Wow.
because she was holding the doctor accountable, the dentist accountable. Like, hey, like we can make more money, but you're like not working with us. The
Wow.
doctor didn't like that, so then kind of spoke to the third party, whoever, and that's it, right? So, oh, she's in fear. She's like, what the hell do I do next? She goes to I forgot what the website is, app, but she starts organizing people's homes. And now she does that for a living. And she's like, I'm building shelves. She just redid her kitchen.
That's
And she's like, I'm doing
amazing.
all these tools I didn't even
Yeah.
know that I had. But now she's working for herself. And again, happier, right? Because of different things. But it's like, man, how crazy is it? It goes back to, we want to know why people can't come to work. Well, stop treating people like they don't matter. Like, that's why they
Right.
not want to come to work.
Right.
So anyway, I thank you so much. I appreciate it. As a matter of
Good
fact,
thing.
I almost forgot. You got to ask the blind question before we go.
I
What's your blind
do.
question?
I don't know if this is a good one now after you asked that one, but I think my thing would be if there's one thing or one experience that you could do over,
Ooh.
what would it be?
Okay, that's
Mhm.
actually really good. Oh man, you're gonna make me think offline. Like, what was that experience? Okay, I appreciate it. I appreciate it,
No
guys.
problem.
If you guys enjoyed this podcast, if you guys enjoy these conversations, sharing, right? That's what makes a difference. Make sure to tag another leader in the comment section, someone that may need to hear this. Maybe just maybe not another leader. Let's tag another youth that loves to give back and they don't even know the nonprofit worlds exist. All right, you guys can hear from Shauna herself that there is just so much passion. There's so much need. We need people with drive, with that same grit that Shauna has continued to bring for the 20 plus years. Make sure you guys do connect with Shauna. Shauna, you on LinkedIn, by the way?
I am. I'm there.
Okay, make sure you guys connect with Shauna on LinkedIn as well. Okay, she loves to have conversations and talk to people. But Shauna, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure, guys. Make sure that you guys go ahead and subscribe. My name is Ephraim. This has been Shauna, Hard and Hustle Podcast. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Thank
Later.
you.